Hello, my name is Jean Rischel, and I'm a trainer with the Institute for Multisensory Education. Today we're going to talk about letter formation. Teachers often ask, what do I say? How do I teach my children to make the letters? Is there a script we can use? I thought I would share with you how I explain letter formation to my students. First of all, we're going to be using house paper. And the house paper looks like this. It's a little house, and the parts of the house line up with the different lines on primary lined paper, which is what young children learn to write with. So let's take a look at the different parts of our house. You can see that we have a living room, we have an attic, and we even have a basement. So how does that work when we start to work with the letters? I'm going to be looking at Zahner-Bloser letters, although you could do something very similar if you used Anelian at your school. And I'm going to be talking about how to form these letters. If you look at the first letter that comes up in the sequence for kindergarten, it's the lowercase c. And you can see that C starts right in the living room of our little house. So let's talk about that. This is the living room or the main room of the house. This is the attic. And here's the basement. See the stairs going down into the basement? Other things that are important. The living room has a ceiling, which corresponds with the dotted lines on our paper. And the living room has a floor, which corresponds with this solid line. And then above the attic, we have the roof, and the very top of our roof corresponds with the solid line at the top. If we go down into the basement for letters that have tails, that final line here in the basement is this piece, the final line on our paper. And here's the space in between where the tails will go. So it's important to talk about all of that with your students before you begin. So how would we explain the letter C? Well, I can explain that it begins in the living room, and we're going to start it just below the ceiling. We're going to come up, touch the ceiling, come around, touch the floor, come up, and stop. We don't want to close it up all the way because that would be the letter O. So using a script like this will really help your students because it makes it not only visual, but also auditory. And then as they're doing it, if they're saying that to themselves, if they can hear that running through their mind, we have visual, auditory, and the tactile kinesthetic motion of actually writing the letter. So again, we can explain to them that it starts just below the ceiling, comes up, touches the ceiling, comes around, touches the floor, comes up, and stops. And that is our letter C. Let's take a look at the next letter. The next week, they would have the letter O. This one's very similar to the C. It starts in the living room, and it's going to come up, touch the ceiling, come around, touch the floor, come up, and this time it's going to close all the way. And that's why it's not a C, it's an O. The week after that, we have the letter A. Notice that the first 4 or 5 weeks of handwriting and reading, students are doing that same motion over and over again. They're starting just below the ceiling, and they're coming up and touching the ceiling and coming around. You can see the letter C there, the letter O, and now the letter A. So let's talk about the A. With the A, again, we're going to start just below the ceiling in our living room. We're going to come up and touch the ceiling, come around and touch the floor, come all the way up to the ceiling, straight up, but don't pick up your pencil yet. Follow that line straight back down to the floor and then stop. Now the 4th week, something special happens. We introduce the letter D, and for the first time, we're going to be going all the way up into the attic. Up until now, C, O, and A have just lived in the living room. So for the D, we're going to follow that same motion that we did for C, O, and A. We're going to start just below the ceiling, and we're going to come up and touch the ceiling, come around and touch the floor, and then come up not just to the ceiling, but all the way up through the attic to the very top of our roof, and straight back down again on that line all the way to the floor, and then stop. In the 5th week, we come to the letter G. For the first time, we're going down into the basement. G, like Q and P and a few of our other letters, has a tail on it. So for the G, again, here we're starting just below the ceiling. We're coming up, touching the ceiling, coming around, touching the floor, coming up to the ceiling, stop, but leave your pencil on the paper. Follow that line back down, not just to the floor, but all the way down in the basement to the very bottom of the basement. Curl it up a little ways and then stop. And that's how we make our letter G. Notice that these letters are always a continuous line. It's not starting and stopping. It's not circles and sticks. When you teach them as separate forms, you end up with spaces between parts of the letter. You could end up with a G that looks like this. So it's important to show it as all one motion. Okay, so now we've gone through our first 5 weeks where we've seen that same motor pattern over and over again. The next letter is M, and this one is a little bit different. The M is going to start a little further over. It's not in the center of the living room. It's way over toward the left. And it's right at the ceiling of the living room. We're going to come down, touch the floor, but don't lift up your pencil. Come back up on that line, touch the ceiling, come around to the floor again, but don't pick up your pencil. Come back up, touch the ceiling, come around, come to the floor, and this time we can stop. And the M has 2 bumps. Okay. Next we have the L. Well, here's an easy one, but it is a tall letter. So we're going to start up at the very top of our house, up in the attic, and we're going to go straight through the attic, down into the living room, all the way to the floor, and then stop. Again, the script is important because it may help students to start and stop in the correct place. Many young students like to write away from their bodies, and you'll see them writing letters from the bottom to the top like this. But that's not how we form this letter. It goes from top to bottom. The next one is the H. Similar to the L, only it has that little bump like the M had. So those are all things you can talk about before you begin your instruction. This is going to start at the very top of the attic, come down through the attic, through the living room to the floor, stop, but leave your pencil there. Follow it back up, but curve around, touch the ceiling, and come straight down to the floor, and stop. Now, the way that I am explaining how to do this might be a little different from what you want to say when you're explaining it, but it's important to come up with a script that makes sense to you so that you can be consistent in how you explain letter formation to your students. The letter T is an easy one. Start at the very top of the attic, come all the way down through the attic to the living room and down to the floor. Here we are going to pick up our pencil. We're going to come up to the ceiling, and then we're going to touch the pencil to the paper as we come across. But notice we are going from left to right here and not right to left. So that's our letter T. Next we have the letter I, which looks a bit like the L, but it's shorter. It just fits in the living room. The reason that I has a dot is so that you know that it is a separate letter. So here we're going to start right at the ceiling and come down and touch the floor and stop. Then we're going to put the dot directly above the I. Be sure that they don't create lollipops, but just use dots. And then we have the J, another dotted letter. So what makes this one different? It curls down into the basement. Let's start at the ceiling, come down to the floor, but keep on going all the way into the basement, come to the bottom here, and curl up. It looks like a little fish hook. And then we'll put a dot there. The dot is always right in the middle of the attic. For the letter K, we will have to pick up our pencil partway through. Start at the top of your attic, come all the way down into the living room to the floor, and stop. Pick up your pencil. Here's the first time we're going to do a little slanty line. It looks a bit like a slide that you might slide down. So we're going to put our pencil over here to the right. We're going to touch the ceiling, and we're going to slant over to the first line, and then we're going to slant away till we hit the floor. Our next letter is the lowercase p. This one can be done all in one motion. So again, we're going to start right at the ceiling. We're going to come down through the floor all the way into the basement, but don't pick up your pencil. Come back up on that line, and curve around, touch the ceiling, come around, touch the floor, and close it up. And there is our letter P. Again, that can be done all in one motion. I made a wider line here so that you can see I'm going down and back up on the same line. And that actually is how Zaner Bloser explains the handwriting process. The CH I'm not going to talk about today because we already know how to make both the C and the H. So in CH week, we would just have students put both of those letters in the little house as they say. CH says ch, their first digraph. The letter formation should already be there. We have our lowercase u. This one starts at the ceiling, comes down, touches the floor, curves back up to the ceiling. Don't pick up your pencil. Comes straight back down that line to the floor, and then stop. Now we have the letter B. It's so important that we make our B and our D correctly from the very beginning so that students don't have problems with reversals. If you start your letter D at the top, then when you get to the bottom, you're not sure which way to go, and you might make a B by mistake. So the letter D is always taught as going around first and then up and down. But with the letter B, we are going to start at the top. So here we're going to the very top of the attic, coming down through the attic all the way down to the floor, and coming back up on that line, go around and touch the ceiling, around and touch the floor, and close it up. So the D starts here, the B starts here. For our letter R, it looks like an N, except that it's much shorter. That second leg doesn't go all the way down. So let's make our R by starting at the ceiling, coming down to the floor, and back up, come around, touch the ceiling, and just come a little way below, and then stop. It stops around the place where we would start a C or an A. Our next letter is lowercase f. Another tall letter that's way up in the attic. This is the first time we've started just below the top of our roof. So we're going to start just below the top of the roof, and we're going to curve up to touch, and then we're going to come all the way down through the attic, down, down, down to the floor, pick up our pencils, and just like we did with the T, we're going to come to the left side, right along our ceiling, and make a line that goes across from left to right. And that's the letter F. Okay, here comes our letter N. We talked about the R before. Here, the N is going to go all the way down to the line. So let's start at the ceiling, come down, down, down to the floor, and right back up on that line again, come around and down to the floor. An N is different from an M because it only has one bump and not two. If they're making R's and N's well at this R's and M's well at this point, then the N should be easy for them. Now the letter E is the most difficult one to make of all the vowels because it starts in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't start at the roof line or the ceiling or the floor. It starts right in the middle of our living room. So if this is our little house, our starting point is going to be just to the left of the very middle of the living room. And we have to go across first and then come up and down and around. That's more difficult, so let's look at that. Let's start right about in the middle and move our pencil over just a little bit to the left. Come straight across, then come up and touch the ceiling, come around and touch the floor and come up. It looks like the letter C, but it has to have this starting line in it. The letter S is also a tricky one because it has that curve in the middle. It's not quite a slanty line. It's more of a curved line. It looks like a snake. So we're going to start just below the ceiling, come up and touch the ceiling, but as we come around, we're going to keep a tight curve in this one. We're not going to go all the way down to the floor. We're going to come over this way, about as far as our starting point was, and then we're going to curve down and touch the floor and curve back up and stop. The SH and the TH, again, are digraphs. We would teach that the children just keep both of those in the house as they practice writing them as one group that makes a single sound. That's how digraphs work, so they would just say SH. says sh, or TH says th, and so on. But when we come to the W, we have a new letter formation to learn. So the W does look like it has several little slides that we can slide up and down on. It's going to start at the ceiling, and it's going to slant down to the floor, and then slant back up to the ceiling, and then slant down to the floor, and then slant back up to the ceiling one more time. That one's fun to make. The WH is made similar to the W, but we want to keep both of those letters in the house as we work on that. Let's talk about our Y. The Y is going to start just like the W did. It's a little slanted line that begins at the ceiling and comes to the floor. But then we do pick up our pencil and come back up to the ceiling a little farther over, and we're going to slant the other way so that we cross that first line but continue all the way down to the bottom of our basement. And that gives us lowercase y. The V is very much like the W or the Y, but it doesn't go into the basement and it doesn't go up and down as many times as W did. So we're going to go ahead and start at the ceiling, come down to the floor, go back up to the ceiling with two slanted lines. X starts something like the W or the Y, but we have another line that goes the opposite way, and they actually cross right in the middle of the living room. So let's see what that one's going to look like. First, we're going to start at the ceiling, and we're going to slide on down to the floor. We're going to pick up our pencil, move to the right, back up on the ceiling here, but to the right side now, and we're going to cross the other way, go right through the other line and continue down to the floor. So that crossing is going to happen right in the middle of the living room. And then we have our letter Z. The Z is an easier one to do because it begins right on the ceiling and goes right across the ceiling. So let's start to the left and move across to the right, right on the ceiling line. And then we're going to slide down the slide to the bottom where the floor is. And then we're going to walk right across the floor to the right to finish up our Z. And finally, we have QU. There's no point in teaching just Q because Q and U are always together in English words. So we're going to put both Q and U in the house. Let's talk about how we make our letter Q. We're going back now to the very beginning when we made C and O and A and D and G. The Q is made the very same way, but it has a tail, and the tail goes a little bit different than it does on the G. So we're going to start just below the ceiling. We're going to come up and touch the ceiling. Come around and touch the floor. All the way up to the ceiling, but don't pick up your pencil yet. Come down, down, down that line, go into the basement, and this way, this time, we're going to curve to the right rather than curving to the left. Here was our G, but this one goes the other way. And then we're going to put the little U right next to it. Start at the ceiling again, come down, touch the floor, come up to the ceiling, and straight down that line to the floor, and stop. And there you have it. There's the alphabet. Remember that you want to be consistent in how you explain how to use the house paper, and encourage the students to keep that script running in their own heads. If they forget how to make a letter, it might help them to be able to say it starts here and it stops there and kind of talk their way through it. I hope this was helpful. Have a great day.